Welcome to episode 89 of the Various and Sundry podcast. I am your host, Matt Harmon, joined live from the Vault Studio on the beautiful campus of Grace College and Theological Seminary by my good friend, my colleague, my co-host, and the man who is committed to having a complete and balanced breakfast.
Absolutely.
John Scott Sloat.
I can't believe you've never heard that term. We were talking pre-pod about breakfast, and I made the comment about a balanced breakfast.
Well, you started off with a round breakfast.
A round breakfast. That's true. I could not remember.
I have no idea what a round breakfast.
The marketing term that was a balanced breakfast.
Okay.
And then everything in those commercials. Rice Krispies, part of a balanced breakfast. Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, part of a balanced breakfast. You know, and it got a little ridiculous that they were showing breakfast with like this bowl of cereal, 4 eggs, bacon,
right,
toast.
Bananas,
yes,
strawberries, like grapefruit. Yeah.
Like who eats that way for breakfast?
I don't know. And I love breakfast food, but I'm not a big breakfast food eater in the morning.
Yeah,
love me some breakfast food, but
some Brenner perhaps.
Some clunch.
Some clunch. Yeah, clunch.
Kate's lunch. So we are recording on a Monday afternoon, and I think before we dive into our show, I think we need to acknowledge that there are some changes coming to the Vault Studio.
Oh yeah, well some interesting changes. Number one, we just learned today. We've known for a while. Somebody is taking our vault door away.
Yes.
So it is. I don't know where it's. Well, I do know where it's going to be. Well, not specifically where, but what it will be used for.
What's that?
Somebody has purchased it, and they're putting it as the entrance to their man cave in their house. And so you'll be able to go to their house and basically open up a bank vault into this guy's man cave of some kind.
How much do you think that goes for? How much does it cost to buy a vault door?
I have no idea. It's got to be thousands. Thousands upon
thousands.
That
thing is thick.
Yeah, what would you say? 4 or 5 inches thick?
Yeah. And how do you mount that? I mean, obviously, that's not just sort of a standard door that you kind of throw some hinges on.
You just can't put it in a stud and you'll be fine, you know?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
I don't know. And then what's the other change?
So, historically, you and I have come in here and there is this little what material is that? Like, is it a little plastic sign that looks like faux wood, right?
Yes.
And it has the letters in white, recording in progress or something on it.
Yeah.
And virtually everybody ignored that sign.
Yeah.
We've been interrupted at least once, maybe twice, with people coming in the midst of our recording.
I think at least twice, yes.
Well, today we're walking into the Vault Studio, and I go to flip the sign, as is our custom.
Yes.
It's not there. I'm like feeling the wall, looking for it. It's just not there. Well, all of a sudden, I look up, and there is a full light, and it says on air.
Yes.
That we can now turn on and off, but turn on while we're in here recording. And it has a veneer of professionalism.
Yeah, it's a legit professional one, yeah.
Which I don't know that's what we are.
Well, we're professional something. I don't think we're professional podcasters.
No.
We are professional something, I think.
But those are the changes. Anything else you'd add to our changes?
No, I think that's enough. I mean, I'm encouraged that I like the on-air little light that we can flip. I'm not optimistic that it's going to make that it's going to stop people. That it's going to stop people.
I agree.
But well, if you would like to connect with the show, we're on most forms of social media. That's probably not even true. We're on a couple forms of social media. We are on Twitter.
Yep.
At VNS Pod. We're on Facebook.
Yep.
Various and Sundry Podcast. And we also have an email address that I'm told you check. Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Most of the time, it's just
spam
emails trying to say like, "Oh my gosh, your podcast is amazing and I love it." I know that's not true. And they're trying to get us to buy something to enhance our podcast.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
That's what it mostly is.
Yes. So that email address is variousandsundrypodcast@gmail.com. We're on YouTube as well. We are not on Insta.
No.
We're not on TikTok.
Oh, goodness, no.
No one wants to see either of us dancing.
No.
So that kind of rules out TikTok. But one thing you could do, I mean, if you're so disposed, would be to head over to the Apple Podcast app or whatever platform you access the podcast on and leave a 5-star rating and a nice, lovely review. I did check before the show. No new reviews as of about a half hour before the show.
Okay.
So in any case, so big weekend of sports.
Big weekend.
It's nice to have football back on.
Yep. Seems to dominate Saturday and Sunday now.
Yeah. Did you watch? How much football did you watch this weekend?
This weekend, I had some house projects I was working on, and I had the Ohio State game on, and so I was working in the garage mostly, and so I would come in and out. Was painting a few things and was able to check the score, see, try to get a vibe for the game, go back out into the garage, work. Yep. So I did a little bit of that. I don't know, putting an hour percentage on that, maybe half hour of the game I saw.
Sure. Cumulative probably.
Yeah. And then Sunday I watched the 1 o'clock game all the way through and watched probably the first quarter of Green Bay, New Orleans, which was a wild game. So what is that? 5 hours of football this weekend?
Yeah.
How about yourself?
A few more than 5. But here's the thing. Here's how I justify it. I'm rarely, with the exception probably of the Ohio State game, just watching football. Mm-hmm. It's on in the background, whether I'm doing a house project, whether I'm reading, whether I'm doing a little course prep or just other things. I'm almost always doing something else with that kind of going on in the background. So that's how I justify it. But let's start with Saturday and let's talk about Ohio State losing to Oregon.
Yeah. What are your thoughts? What happened? I mean, Oregon's a good team.
Oregon is a good team. It was a winnable game, and I still think Ohio State should have won. Oregon deserved to win. Okay, before I say anything else, on that day, Oregon was the better team. They were better coached, better prepared. They deserved to win that game. Ohio State still had some chances, though, along the way. Let's start with the positives. Ohio State's quarterback is a redshirt freshman, and in his second start, he threw for 484 yards, 34 of 54, I think, for 484 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Okay.
He had 1 interception late in the game, probably trying to force things because they're down a touchdown. So,
sure.
He played well. He missed some throws that had he hit them, we might have won the game.
Okay.
But it's not his fault we lost. Of course, there's the idiot lunatic fringe of every fan base, blaming him, of course, for losing us the game, despite the fact that in his second start he threw for the second most yardage in Ohio State history, and
doesn't sound like his fault.
Yeah, it's not. The fault rests squarely on the defense. Our defensive coordinator is terrible. I'm not the guy that likes to be the let's call for someone to be fired, but I'm going to make an exception with this. This is the start of his second year. And he, last year, he's never been a coordinator. Last year was COVID. You're like, I don't know. Is it fair to judge anything during a COVID year?
Sure.
Maybe not, or at least you kind of have those doubts. He had all off season to fix the issues. And in the first game against Minnesota, they were like, yeah, there's still some concerning signs. And then this game was like, he just got embarrassed in terms of being out-coached, out-schemed. And one of the biggest frustration, honestly, is we're not even at a point where we're getting guys lined up properly before the snap. That's a sign of bad coaching. The talent is there, but he should not survive after this season, barring some dramatic improvements. And so I'm to the point now where obviously I want Ohio State to win. But unless they make almost unheard of improvements, I don't want them to make the college football playoff. Because a team like Alabama might hang 80 on that defense. It's that bad.
Ooh.
So the way Ohio State's going to win games this year is going to be the offense is going to have to score 45 plus and hope that the defense can get an occasional stop. So deeply disappointing on that front. Elsewhere in college football, Iowa has put together a strong start to the season. And if you're just looking at who has had the best start to the year, Iowa looks like they are the strongest team in the Big Ten right now.
So they beat Indiana last week.
Yes, and then they beat Iowa State.
Iowa State. And that was that a 9-10?
Yes.
Okay.
On the road at Iowa State. So good win
That's
for them.
a good win.
Yep.
I'm trying to find the Indiana score.
They beat they played Idaho, I think. I mean, yeah, from what I remember, the score was not close. So I think they're kind of riding the ship a little bit. But John, what we need to talk about is the Notre Dame Fighting Irish.
Okay. What specifically about the Fighting Irish? They played Toledo?
They did.
This weekend? Okay.
They had to score within the last 2 minutes of the game to win that game.
That's not a pretty win.
At home. So I don't think our Irish fans are probably too happy right now with the state of things in South Bend. But yeah, so I mean that brings me some small measure of enjoyment, that Ohio State definitely has its struggles. But if I'm going to pick losing to number 12 Oregon by a touchdown, I'll take that over barely squeaking by
against Toledo
at home. So anyway, I don't think either of those teams are college football playoff material unless something dramatic changes in the future here. So there's your college football.
Okay.
Let's talk some NFL, John. Tell us about your Jets.
Yeah. Well, expectations are not high for the Jets. So they had an abysmal first half. Really played pretty poorly.
Didn't score.
Did not score. I think they had under 100 yards of offense in the first half. I mean, it was bad. However, second half, they seemed to put some things together and hung 14 points on the Panthers, and I think gave up one field goal in the second half. So
they lost 19-14, I think.
19-14,
right?
yep.
Okay.
And Zach Wilson threw 2 touchdowns.
Your favorite Mormon?
My favorite Mormon, yeah, which I think is a great line. Might be a little insensitive to our audience in Utah, but
do we have an audience in Utah? Have
not
we
that I'm aware of.
We have downloads in Utah. I'm not sure we do. Maybe
that might be
do.
one of the states we're missing.
Maybe.
But yeah. So overall encouraged
Okay.
to see Zach Wilson do that. Our defense is nothing to write home about, but held them.
He gave up 19 points.
You're in the game.
In the NFL, I feel like if you give up less than 20, you should win the game.
Mm-hmm.
In college, I feel like if you give up less than 30, you should probably win the game.
Mm-hmm.
I think the number is a little different, but still.
Agreed.
There's some numbers where you're like, I'm sorry, if you only give up 19 points in the NFL, you should win that game.
Mm-hmm. So I feel pretty good. I need to watch some more things and listen to some podcasts.
One game
to get a full breakdown, and I'm excited to see Zach Wilson. Through for over 250 yards or around 250 yards, 2 touchdowns. First NFL game, mostly in the second half.
Yep.
I'm pretty pleased.
Yeah. And anything else? Anything else that stood out to you from the NFL weekend when it comes to other games?
Well, Packers lost to New Orleans, the Jameis Winston the Saints.
Yeah.
Big time, like over 30 to like a field goal.
Like 38-3 or something.
Yeah.
Like that. Something crazy.
It was wild.
In Lambeau, was it not?
I believe so,
Yeah.
No. I think it was supposed to be in New Orleans, but because of the hurricane, they've moved it.
Oh, okay.
So I think it's elsewhere, but I think it's in the southeast. I'm trying to remember the situation.
I remember seeing it was outside, and I think I just assumed
Yes.
that it was at Lambeau. But I didn't watch that game. I was actually in the 4:00 window. I actually watched the first half of the Browns-Chiefs game.
Oh, and that was very good.
Entertaining. I only saw the first half. Browns looked good in the first half. I didn't see the second half. Chiefs came back and won. I mean, I know if you're a Browns fan, you're disappointed that you lost because that was a game that you were leading and had control of at points. But I think at some level you have to be pleased that you're right there. I mean, you're very competitive with the best team in the AFC on the road.
The Chiefs were a lot of people's Super Bowl pick.
Yeah. So, I think there's reason to be hopeful there. But and then last night I watched a little bit of the Rams Bears game just to see if Justin Fields got any playing time.
How many passes did he have?
He threw one pass.
Okay.
It's complete. They look like they're using him in kind of short yardage and in the red zone. So he had a rushing touchdown.
That's pretty interesting.
So they are getting him in, but they're almost treating him just like a specialty package kind of play, or kind of thing. So
if they do that for a year and he's able to see the field and get used to being in a game without having the weight of the game on him, it may be a helpful thing.
Yes, I'm torn because I want him to play, but I've also seen enough high draft picks get thrown in too early, and it destroys them. So, I think
I'm not familiar with that at all.
Yeah, seriously. So, it's just nice to have football back, though, isn't it?
Yes.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Also, I'll highlight from Sports Weekend: Mets took 2 of 3 from the Yankees. Francisco Lindor hit 3 home runs last night to beat the Yankees, so that was very exciting.
Okay. Yeah, that's and that was clearly an intentionally scheduled around 9/11 series.
Yes. They all wore. Did you watch the Mets Yankees on 9/11?
No, but I think I saw a clip where the Yankees had their caps were like Fire Department New York, FDNY or something like that. Or maybe that was one of the players.
So the players all had like basically Fire Department, Port Authority, NYPD. They had all those hats and one other, and they were kind of randomized throughout the players. So there was no Mets hat, there was no Yankees hat for the game. It was all about the different public servants, basically.
Yes. Yeah.
Which was pretty cool.
Nice touch. So that leads into our topic for today. And, we debated, and it felt like this was an appropriate thing for us to spend some time talking about. Is just on now the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, to just reflect a little bit on that day, on our experience, and kind of takeaways from that. So, John, let me start with you. How old were you? Where were you when this happened?
I was 13, so 13 years old. I was in school, obviously. I think it was a Tuesday?
It was.
Okay. I was in school, and I remember –
What city or like where were you living?
We were living in Chattanooga, Tennessee at the time. And I had been in I'd been in a class, and I remember the teacher coming in and going, "Hey, just wanted to let everybody know a plane has struck one of the Twin Towers." And I think at that point, that was the point of the day where we thought it was basically a propeller plane that got out of control and hit one of these towers.
Yep.
And then by the time I got to my next period class, which was history, oddly enough, they had it on the TV, and they had it. We spent the whole class period watching things unfold.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Where were you?
So we were living in Chicago. I was in my second year of seminary at Trinity. And so I remember the house we lived in at the time, our bedroom was like a loft that looked over the living room. And I remember my wife was watching the Today Show. And she yelled up and said, "Hey, you should come check this out. A plane hit the World Trade Center." And then that sort of started it in terms of just kind of watching it. She went off to teach at the homeschool co-op. And then, of course, for the rest of the morning, I was glued to the television. Yeah. So what are some of the things that, as you look back now, that stand out to you about that day?
Yeah, that was a weird day. I think it was for everybody, but it was particularly weird. We had left – my family lived on Long Island up until I was 7 years old. And so there were still memories from there. There were still friends that were there. And so one of the things that I remember about that day is being very fearful for my grandfather. We had just up until that point of life, up until I was 11, 12, at that age, he started inviting our entire family to his World War II Army reunions. And so we used to get together with his unit once a year in a different city or place and they used to tell stories. They had different performers, come and work with their troop or what have you. And everybody's family would come, and it was always a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I remember it was the weekend before 9/11 that this happened. And so I remember, and I knew my grandfather was traveling back to New York. He was still living on Long Island at the time. And I just remember being like concerned for him. Yeah. Just driving through the city, trying to get there. And so I remember bursting into tears in my second period class, just like, what about my grandfather? So that was part of it. He ended up getting home on the 10th. And I believe he learned about the towers getting hit from seeing the smoke from his house. So there was that angle that I was nervous about. We also had our next door neighbor when we had lived in New York was a Queen City firefighter. And so trying to get in touch with him and his family to see if he was all right. And it sounds like him and his unit arrived at the tower or were in transit to the tower when the first one fell.
Okay.
And then we'd had another neighbor in South Carolina who was working in the State Department at the time. And if you remember from that morning, there was reports a car bomb went off outside the State Department.
I don't remember that.
Oh, really?
No.
I vividly remember that. And so we were nervous for him, and so trying to get in touch with him and his wife. Yeah. Turns out everybody was safe and okay. But yeah, those are some of the memories I have, is like checking on these different connections that we had to make sure everybody was okay. And then I just remember a lot of anger, a lot of sadness, a lot of confusion. I don't think I knew much about – I don't think I could have told you what Islam was at that time. Yeah. But I remember a lot of those emotions and trying to figure it out. How about yourself? What do you remember?
Yeah, I just remember again, I was a little older. I just remember very early on, like once the second plane hit and it was clear, like, this is terrorism. This was not some sort of freak terrible accident, but like the country's under attack pretty early on. And then the plane hits the Pentagon. And just this sense of how many more of these are there? Like, when is this going to – like, when are we going to reach the like, okay, like we can take a breath and we can just sort of figure out, that extending even into the early afternoon, right? Because there were planes unaccounted for, and they're trying to figure out like, well, we think we got all the planes down, but we're not sure. And then I remember, by the end of the day, one of the things that was very strange is that so where we lived in Chicago was in one of the flight paths for Chicago O'Hare Airport. Not one of the major ones, but enough where we had a relatively steady stream of air traffic over our property. Not in like where it's really, really loud, but enough where you notice it a little bit. Yeah. And by middle of the afternoon, still a beautiful, clear, sunny day, it was eerily quiet because there was no air traffic going on overhead. And that was the case for the next 3 days. Yeah. Where the skies were just empty and quiet, and just that's just surreal to think about. And then, of course, I think it was I forget how many days later, but one of those sort of definitive moments was when Bush went to visit the wreckage, the ruins of the towers. Yeah, and he stood up on the rubble and he's standing
with
next
the megaphone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
standing next to the firefighter who's clearly, just like he's tired, but has that sort of grim determination on his face. And W puts his arm around him and has that iconic moment of someone out in the crowd says, "We can't hear you," and he says, "I can hear you, and the people who took down these towers will hear from all of us." That's just one of those iconic moments in American history where, and I'm not going to get into a political discussion about George W. Bush, but I will say his confidence, his dare I say, his moxie, I think, at least for me, and I think a lot of Americans, was a welcome, refreshing, like, okay, we took a punch and it was a doozy, but we're going to start throwing our own punches here real soon.
Yeah.
I think it was a big rallying cry for the nation.
Yeah.
So, that's one of those things that stands out to me as well. What about you in terms of like the aftermath, like maybe some of the days, the weeks, and even the months after that? Like, what was your perception of how things had changed, life in general, like that kind of thing?
Yeah. Where we were living in Tennessee, I remember there was some nervousness around Tennessee specifically. So you wouldn't know this unless you lived in the area, but there's this thing called Tennessee Valley Authority, and it's a nuclear plant. And it provides power for most of the Southeast.
Yeah.
And so everybody was like, oh, my gosh, we're right in the heart of, when they pick back up, this could be a spot they hit, So there was some of that. There was like a fairly constant bit of fear. I remember, goodness, the guy with the shoe bombs was like – it felt like a week after all that, picking up where they left off. Do you remember the guy with the shoe bombs?
I do. I think that was more like December, though. I think it was several months.
In my 13-year-old brain, it was 2 weeks later.
Right.
So I remember a lot of fear, still confusion, trying to I was 13, trying to put the world together in a lot of ways, because I was probably at a spot then where I thought every other country was a third world country at that time.
Right.
And why wouldn't they aspire to be us? That was sort of my 13-year-old brain putting everything together.
Right.
I think some of the aftermath. I've been to the World Trade Center site twice since they've put it up. And one time I went on my own when it was still under construction. They were still building it, and got to go to the museum and walk around the holes where the towers are. And have you been there?
I've never been there. No.
So it's worth the price of admission.
I'm sure.
Just to walk around and just see how giant those towers were, and then to see all the names of the people lined up there. And I went there with my dad about, probably 10 years ago now. And we walked around and found names of people he knew that were in the building. He knew the manager of the restaurant on the top floor of the World Trade Center. A pretty excellent position to have normally.
Yeah.
But walked around and found high school friends of his and coworkers or people that he had business dealings with who perished that day. So that was a sobering experience in ways that we that the aftermath still feels like it affects me. And I still get emotional about it even this weekend watching tributes and those sorts of things.
Yeah, I remember just the pervasive sense of what's next.
Yeah,
just this almost cultural certainty of there's gonna be more, and it may not be necessarily the same kind of attack. It may not be airplanes being hijacked and flown into buildings, but something else. And so I don't know if you remember this or not, but there was an anthrax scare. Do you remember this?
Yes.
Anthrax was sent in letters to Congress. To people in Congress, and so there was a big scare of is this part of it? And I'm not sure they ever really fully figured out what was going on with that. But I just remember this pervasive sense of cultural fear of
Yeah.
we're going to get hit again. Where's it coming from? What's next? And I think it shattered just this this false sense of security that we as Americans had of those kinds of things happen over there.
Yeah.
And we're the greatest country in the world, and we've got 2 oceans. One on each side that protects us kind of from these kind of crazy things in general terms. And then, this happens, and it just shatters that illusion of invulnerability that a lot of Americans had.
I remember one plane flight I had before 9/11. We were going to a wedding. We were living in South Carolina at the time. We went to a wedding in New Hampshire, and we obviously flew into Boston. And I remember my parents for this wedding bought them steak knives. And they wanted to make sure that it didn't get damaged on through checked luggage.
Yeah.
And so they brought it as a carry-on, steak knives.
Yeah.
And they just went, "What's in here?" "Well, it's a wedding gift, it's steak knives." "Oh, okay." And they just sort of let it go on through, like it was no big deal.
Totally.
Right now, you'd end up in a room. You might get roughed up a little bit. There's a lot of things.
Yeah.
The world has changed in that way.
Totally. I was struck this week by my wife and I watched one program on 9/11 because we just did not want to descend into the spiral of sadness that reflecting on 9/11 can certainly bring. But the program that we watched, it followed – so there was a camera crew that was following around this he wasn't a fire chief. I don't remember how the rankings work within the fire department, chief and lieutenants and all those sorts of things. I'm ignorant of that. So my apologies. It's not intended to offend
to
anyone.
The firefighting community, a large listenership out there.
Yes.
Yeah.
But this camera crew was following this fire crew around, and they were checking out a gas leak like 14 blocks away from the World Trade Center on the morning of 9/11. And it starts with them just kind of following along, like, okay, you're just checking this gas leak. And then this camera crew is the crew that caught about the only footage of the very first plane that hit the first tower.
Wow.
And so you see the camera looking at this like grate where they're checking for this gas leak, and then you can start to hear the plane coming overhead, and you see the camera pan up and then quickly like move to the left, and you see the first plane go into the towers, and you hear people's reactions, the gasps, the shrieks, the oh my God kind of language. And then instantly that fire crew is like in the vehicles, and they are just busting it to the Twin Towers. But then this was the most disturbing part of watching this. This camera crew continued to follow them, and they are in the lobby of one of the towers. I forget which one, and they're figuring out what their plan of attack to get up and evacuate and rescue people. And you start to hear this loud, like on the awning or like the covering there, and you see all these firefighters like look up, and they realize what's happening. Those are people jumping.
Those are jumpers. Yeah.
And you hear that that sound like every like 20 to 30 seconds. There's another one and another one. And you can just see the looks on these firefighters' faces like, what is happening? Like they know what's happening, but just like, this is not real. Like this can't be happening. But that to me just gets me to and then they showed some of the close-up footage of like people hanging out of the tower and waving white towels or something to try to get attention, and it's just like I can't put myself in that spot to think about. You're forced to make the choice. I can either burn to death or jump to my death. Those are my options.
Yeah.
Like I have no third option available to me. Just so sobering. And it's one of those things where I don't enjoy thinking about that or reflecting on that, but I do think it's necessary just to remember what it was like on that day, how unspeakably awful it was that those attacks happened and people faced with just unspeakably awful kinds of choices, especially as you think about the college students that we teach, John. They don't remember it. They either weren't alive.
Yeah.
Like my youngest son, who is a third-year student here at Grace, he was like 4 months old when this happened. Obviously no memory of it.
Yes. I made the mistake of going, none of you were alive for 9/11 a couple of days ago in class. And they're like, well, yes, I was. I was 3 months old. I was like, okay, I understand what you're saying
None
here.
of you remember it.
Yes.
Yeah. So
you guys watched the documentary over
we did. Yeah. We watched like the first episode. National Geographic had this series of – and this one focused on the first responders.
Okay.
So interviewing a fire captain or chief, and you see the pictures of him on that day, and then you see him today, 20 years older.
Sure.
And hearing him make statements like, "I remember standing in a circle of firefighters around me and giving them instructions, and I'm the only one standing in that circle who survived that day."
Oh gosh. Yeah.
So anyway, I think it's important for us to pause on a day like this, especially at the 20-year mark, because you and I are both big believers in the importance of studying and understanding history and its value. And I do think a lot of people who even were alive for that and old enough to remember it have often forgotten some of the lessons that we learned in the aftermath of that. And I fear that we as a nation are in danger of repeating some of those mistakes that led up to those kind of attacks.
I did not watch that documentary. I think I saw that documentary. Is that the Hulu one?
It is on Hulu, yeah.
Okay. I saw that. I didn't think I could commit the emotional energy to it. So I did I watched the Mets Yankees had a pretty excellent tribute to 9/11 that night. But I also and this will get into one thing I like later, but the ESPN short 30 for 30 short first pitch,
yes,
which kind of captures that day, and then
which was like maybe a week after 9/11 when you're talking about when Bush threw out the first pitch at Yankee Stadium.
Yeah, it was end of October when he threw out the first pitch. Because
it was that much later. Okay.
Yes, because it's when baseball playoffs were commencing by the end of the month, by the end of October.
Gotcha.
So he threw out the first pitch at Game 3 of the World Series, Yankees against the Diamondbacks, and even just like he's interviewed in that, and he has such a good demeanor when it comes to those sorts of things, and I mean, I was we were planning to go to Costco on Saturday, and so I'm downstairs waiting for my wife, and I just pop this on, and she comes down there. I'm on full tears, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, what's going on?" And I was like, I showed her what I was watching, and she was like, "Oh, okay." Yeah. So
I do remember that, and him he was wearing a bulletproof vest underneath his jacket, and
he and then the other thing I did to commemorate is I listened to Tim Keller's sermon the Sunday following 9/11. I also listened to that as well. Yeah,
I remember what my pastor preached that Sunday. He preached out of Hebrews about a kingdom that cannot be shaken. It was such a good example of of pastoral wisdom and care that showed the appropriate grief and sorrow, and yet we have a kingdom that cannot be destroyed by even the most evil intent of people like this.
Yeah.
So, which is
in a moment like that, as a pastor, you got to pivot.
Yeah.
You can't go through with preaching whatever it was you were going to preach.
Agreed. Well, I don't think there's any easy way to make a transition from that to our athletes, so we'll just make a clunky one. John, This is episode 89.
Yeah.
We need an athlete.
Well, we got some options, I'd say. Mike Ditka.
Doc Coach.
Coach Ditka.
Yeah, he was a tight end for the Bears and the Eagles and the Cowboys, though I think he became most famous for being the coach of the Chicago Bears.
Winning the 85 Super Bowl.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. And that mustache.
That mustache.
Iconic.
And the cigars. It feels like he's always got a beautiful mustache and a cigar in his mouth.
But really, don't you think what cemented him culturally was when Saturday Night Live did the skit where they have the guys from Chicago doing this show, it's just that cemented his place within the sort of larger culture as an icon.
Just had another heart attack that makes a baker's dozen. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to go with the Bears 187 to -2. So,
and Michael Jordan joined them on that, I believe, one time.
Yes. Yes.
So Mark Bavaro.
Bavaro, tight end for the Giants, part of their Super Bowl teams, 85 to 94.
Okay. Clyde Lovett?
Lavellet. Yep. Yeah. Played from 1953 to 1964 in the NBA, so he was a center.
Nice. Alexander Mogilny.
Yeah. Are you familiar with him at all? You're my hockey guy. Played from 86 to 2006. He was one of the first Soviets to play in the NHL.
Yeah, I don't recognize that name, but he has a very typical hockey career that just seems to go on forever.
Yeah. And then our Ohio State entrant, which interesting fact coming from him. John Frank was a tight end from 1980 to 1983.
Okay.
A modestly successful career. Nothing to write home about. Don't think he played in the NFL at all. But what's notable about John Frank is that he helped establish the national bobsled team for Israel.
Well, of course. If there's any country that screams bobsled, it's certainly Israel.
Yeah. I mean, they're not going to be as notable as, say, Jamaica. But, I mean, there's just so many questions I have. When I read that little fun fact, I'm like, how? Like, why is this guy connected with bobsledding?
Oh, yeah.
Why is it in Israel? Like, just all sorts of questions that I have.
That is interesting.
Who you got?
Oh, probably Ditka.
Yeah, you got to go.
It feels like
Doc Coach.
Yeah, it feels like Ditka's the only way forward here.
Yeah. He also, you remember, he coached for the Saints. You remember that? Late 90s, I think.
Okay.
And what he's most famous for is he basically gave up all of his draft picks to draft Ricky Williams, running back out of Texas, who won the Heisman Trophy. And he turned out to be not a full-on bust, but pretty close in the NFL, in part because he liked the weed a little too much.
Yeah. He liked to smoke.
Yes. So Ditka it is. One thing you liked.
I mentioned it earlier, but the 30 for 30 short, it's 30 minutes. It's free on Hulu. I even think it's on YouTube, quite frankly, called First Pitch with which W. Worth your time.
Yep. I am going to go with my life group.
Okay.
I have just been so grateful these past few weeks for the encouragement and just the sweet Christian community that we've experienced in our life group, even as we've had some difficult situations to kind of walk through, and grateful for just how our life group has kind of rallied around to provide encouragement and to step in and care as much as possible. So just grateful for that, grateful for the leadership of Jordan in Indiana, who's our life group leader. So thankful for that. But, well, John, are we about ready to call it mission accomplished here?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So we've talked some football. Welcome back, football. We have talked 9/11. We've talked the coach, Mike Ditka.
Mike Ditka.
Da Bears. We've talked an ESPN 30 for 30 short. We've talked about life group and experiencing community within the body of Christ. So I think by definition, we have covered our various and sundry topics. And so all that's left to say is until next time, the Lord bless y'all real good.
Later.